Hey folks, and welcome back to the channel. In this video, I figured I would do an update on what's in my bag for 2023. I haven't done one of these since the 2022, so it's been quite some time, and I have made some tweaks to what's in my bag since last time. And I thought now would be a good time to go ahead and put this video out, mostly because I just haven't really been able to get out to the course and film too much. For one, there's been bad weather a lot of the time here in the Southeast. It's starting to get to just be rainy quite often, and then also I've just been super busy with some different gigs going on in both the disc golf world and the esports space. So for example, if you didn't see, I hosted the Tournament Central show for one day, the Dynamic Disc Open, and I'll be doing it for the entirety of the Reserve Championship coming up. Then also have some esports gigs on the horizon that I'm going to be working on throughout the course of June and July. So just been kind of busy, but it's something I could sit down and do here real quick and just kind of give you an update in case you were curious on what I'm throwing. So the first thing is I actually did make a change to putting putters since last year. I've been putting now with the classic hybrid deputies, and I've been using these for the last 6 months or so. And I actually originally putted with deputies when I first started playing and then switched to Fierces later. But I really switched back to the deputy for three key reasons. You know, one being that they're far less expensive than Fierces. So if I have to replace them or buy extras for putting practice, I'm going to spend on average probably $8 to $10 less per deputy in comparison to the Fierce. Second, the Fierce only comes in one plastic as far as like its, you know, base plastic for putting. And so in different weather conditions and things of that nature, I found that they would sometimes feel like a little bit sticky, particularly in more humid weather. So the deputies actually have some different options I can go to. Right now I'm using the classic hybrid. They're kind of like a nice, kind of just, you know, neutral stiffness and tacky feel, and so it works in most weather conditions for me. But if I ever have to switch it up between, you know, cold and hot weather, I have some different plastics I can go to. So that's been nice. And the other big thing is that there's actually a little bit more of like a beveled edge to rest my finger on when I'm putting, where the Fierce is a little bit more rounded. And it's not that big of a difference. I can putt with Fierces just fine, but I switched back to the deputy mostly for cost and for, you know, plastic varieties. But I also have found that I do like that little bit more beveled edge to put my index finger on. I've always been someone who likes the more shallow beadless putters, and so the deputy just really fits very nicely. Now, as far as throwing putters go, I have two proxies in the bag. One is the base plastic Electron, and then this one over here is going to be the Plasma. So this one, you know, pretty understable. It's pretty beat in at this point. So this is kind of my main understable throwing putter. Can throw it, you know, for turnovers, you know, highs or flips to flat with maybe a little bit of right drift. Just a putter I feel super accurate with, particularly in the woods and tunnel shots and things of that nature. This is definitely kind of the go-to for me. And then, you know, the Plasma proxy is just a little bit more stable. I don't get nearly as much flip up or as much drift to the right. It's kind of just a dead straight flyer. And so that's kind of one of the, you know, main throwing putters that I'm going to have in the bag. As far as some stuff that's a little bit more stable, I have the Glow Envy here. This is kind of my go-to, more overstable backhand throwing putter. Definitely has some more bite to it in comparison to the Proxy. You know, has some good fade. With it being in the Glow plastic, it has a little bit more stability than, you know, other Envies out there. And so this is definitely something that I can trust to make sure it gets some finish and feel really good about it. Then for some of the approach disc in my bag that I mostly do forehands with, we'll start with this. This is the Lucid Ice Suspect. Really low profile is like one of the main reasons why I actually like it quite a lot. Not sure what the whole fragmenting thing there is, so sorry about that with the webcam kind of messing up a little bit. But essentially, I like it because it's low profile. It's even lower profile than the Zone. It's kind of similar to maybe like the A2 or A3 from Prodigy as far as like how it feels in the hand when it comes to profile. But for a approach disc, it's definitely a little bit straighter. So I kind of like it for hyzer flip up forehands, or to kind of have like a straighter forehand shot. And this is also kind of a backup to the Glow Envy for backhand. It's just a little bit more torque resistant for forehand. So this is usually just for like straight forehands, hyzer flip forehands, and then kind of a backup to the Glow Envy for backhands if I want to get a little bit of extra practice out in the course. And so definitely liking this quite a lot. Then I do have a Crystal Flex Zone in the bag. This is my main forehand upshot disc. Also, if I need a more overstable backhand disc than the Envy, because I want to limit my distance, or I just need something with some finish, or I'm trying to fight a headwind, then the Zone definitely, you know, comes out. And then finally, if I need something even more overstable than the Zone, then I have my trusty Justice. Most people know this thing is a brick, doesn't have very much glide, super overstable. I think the only thing you can really compare it to is maybe like the Mutant from Discmania. Pretty much every other disc is going to have a little bit more glide than this thing does. But yeah, this thing is basically a brick, but I love it for that reason. It helps me limit distance if I'm not trying to go too far. I can use it for some like utility overstable backhand skip shots on shorter holes. I can also, or shorter approaches. I can also really trust this in a headwind, whereas maybe the zone might roll over on me. This thing always is going to be able to fight the headwind no problem on forehand up shots. I can also do like little chop shot forehands with it if I need to like throw a flex shot or something like that. So definitely the Justice comes in handy. I use it quite a lot for approaches, particularly in the wind. Now to get into my mids, first up, I still have this in the bag. My most understable is going to be the original Midnight Prowl. This thing is reliably understable, so definitely can use it for turnovers, hyzer flips with a little bit of turn at the end. Definitely just a reliable, understable mid-range. I mean, that's really all I can say about it. It's just the one that I'm really digging. Then for a more neutral mid-range, I do have this Pathfinder with this really cool water bending die on it. This is an Ethos Pathfinder. I've had it in the bag for quite a while, so it's a little bit seasoned. Still pretty much a dead straight flyer. Maybe has a little bit of drift to the right now because it's been beat up a little bit, but still just probably the mid-range I trust the most. Probably my furthest flying mid-range. You know, most mids I can kind of get into that 285 to 300 range. Sometimes I can get this Pathfinder over 300 feet. So definitely just a mid that I trust. It's probably one of my favorite discs in the bag. It's definitely one of those ones that I can just trust to throw really straight, not have too much drift to the right, not have too much finish, just kind of basically a laser beam, point and shoot, mid-range. Really love the Pathfinder. It's the furthest flying mid I've ever thrown. It's probably the mid I recommend the most to people. Really enjoy the Pathfinder. And then finally, I do have a couple of more stable mid-ranges in the bag. This is the Iron Samurai 4, which is basically just the special version of the MD3. I find that this is pretty similar to the Pathfinder, but it has just a little bit of left finish that the Pathfinder doesn't have. So if I throw this flat, it's going to actually have a little bit of fade to the left, whereas the Pathfinder just kind of coasts forward. So basically, if I need something with some finish, something with a little bit more stability, then basically the next bump up is going to be the Iron Samurai 4. And then finally, the last mid I have in the bag is going to be this Prism Proton Pyro. This is really a disc I don't use too much on backhands. I would say maybe for like fighting a headwind, or if I need something that's just really overstable to get around a corner, or like a skip shot, or throw like a big flex shot on a backhand or something like that. This definitely has more glide than the Justice or something along those lines, so it can be useful on a backhand. But what I really like to use this for is for forehands, when I need to throw something that I feel like I can't quite throw like a zone far enough for, but I don't really need to step up to a fairway driver yet. This has been like one of the most torque resistant mid-ranges I've ever thrown a forehand with. It feels super comfortable in the hand. It's lower profile. It flies pretty darn far for a mid on a forehand, and that's really what I'm using it for. All right, so next up, let's get into the fairway drivers I have in my bag. I have quite a lot of these. These are the discs I throw probably the most. First up, I have the new stock SLine FD. This is just a really nice point and shoot, dead straight flyer. It has a little bit of drift to the right for me. You can get some turn out of it. Kind of similar to the Pathfinder, but just flies a little bit further. I mean, that's really the best way I can describe it for me. Then I have two Explorers in the bag. The first one is going to be just kind of this gold line. This flies very similar to my SLine FD, but it has a little bit more finish. It has a little bit more drift to the left at the end of its flight on the backhand. I wouldn't call it overstable by any means. It's definitely not like something that fights really hard left. It mostly flies pretty straight. It's just the FD will tend to maybe coast to the right a little bit on a backhand, or just kind of stay dead straight, whereas this Explorer will actually get a little bit of left finish. And if I put it on a slight touch of hyzer, I can get it to ride like a pretty nice pushing hyzer line. So really dig this Explorer for that. And then to complement it, I have this Opto X Explorer, and this is actually pretty overstable as far as Explorers go. This has a pretty good amount of left finish, something I can even throw on like small flex lines. I can't go like crazy on the anhyzer with it. It will burn over, but slight ante, I can get some flex shots out of it. Just get a little bit more finish. I can also throw some straight forehands with this disc if I want to. Also something nice for like a headwind if I still want to push pretty straight. And I feel like the other Explorer is going to get burned over by the headwind. This is something I can kind of step up to and feel a little bit more confident in. All right, next up I have a couple of Saints, sort of. The first one is this beat up gold line normal Saint. Pretty understable at this point. Can use it for big turnovers, hyzer flip to turn, Put enough hyzer on it, can be kind of a dead straight flyer through a tunnel. Definitely can get some good distance with this as well. I can throw this just as far as pretty much any of my distance drivers, you know, kind of get it to that 330-foot range or so. Definitely one of the older discs in my bag. Really love it a lot, again, for just understable, you know, fairway flight. I mean, that's really the best way I can put it. A little bit of a bump up to that is going to be this Goldline Orbit St. Pro from Christian Tatar. This also does have some turn to it, don't get me wrong, but it has a little bit more stability than the other Saint. I can trust it to fly a little bit more dead straight, not have as much drift to the right on the backhand. I can put on like a touch of hyzer and basically have it fly dead straight. Very similar to the other Saint, but just something that has a little bit more integrity. Then I have two Dynasties in the bag. So the first one is just going to be this Eric Oakley Special Edition SLine Dynasty. This is basically just a bump up from the Saint Pro in stability. Still a pretty dead straight flyer, but it definitely has a little bit more left finish on a backhand in comparison to the Saint Pro. It doesn't have as much drift to the right or as much turn for me. And I can push it pretty much a similar distance, but again, just I don't have as much risk of it rolling over to the right on me on a backhand. It definitely has a little bit more finish left. I can also throw some like nice hyzer flip forehands with this for like some dead straight forehands. So definitely enjoying this. Then a bump up to that would be this Halo Dynasty, which is actually decently overstable for my arm speed. Again, if I throw this on a forehand flat, it basically flies dead straight and actually has some finish. On a backhand, it has way more left finish than the normal SLine Dynasty. I can trust this a little bit more. If I just need some more finish, but still get some good forward progress, then, you know, the Halo Dynasty is just kind of that step up from the other Dynasty. And then finally, we'll get into the last fairway drivers in my bag, which are basically all Felons. First off, I have this Orbit Fusion Felon. This is definitely just kind of like your standard overstable 9-speed. I mean, that's really the best way I can put it. You know what I'm talking about. Really good for forehands. It's mostly what I use it for. I will occasionally use it for backhands for like flex shots or fighting headwinds, or if I need some type of skip shot, or if I just need something that has like some dramatic hyzer finish, I can definitely pull it out for that. But, you know, just kind of your standard overstable 9-speed that I really like throwing forehands with. Now, kind of a step up to that is actually this prototype Sake Bomb Felon. I find this to be a little bit faster than a stock Felon, and this prototype also flies a little bit straighter. I think the first run of the Sake Bomb Felons, they kind of adjusted it a little bit to where they fly a little bit more overstable, but this prototype run actually flies pretty straight. I can definitely push this a little bit further than the other Orbit Felon that I just showed you on both forehand and backhand. It just feels a touch faster, a touch less overstable, and so I really like it for like some straighter forehands, as well as, you know, an overstable disc I can actually throw on a backhand and get some distance out of, as opposed to some of the other like overstable 9-speeds where I feel like I don't get as much forward progress because I just don't quite have the arm speed for them. And then lastly, I kind of have a utility Felon. It's kind of an older run Eric Oakley Lucid X Felon. Don't really use this too much. This is more for like flex forehands, fighting headwinds, skip shots. It's kind of more of a utility overstable 9-speed for me, but I'm definitely happy to have it when I need it. Then I guess we get into like this weird control driver slot that some people say, but you could also just call these distance drivers. They're basically just kind of like 10 to 11 speeds. For understable, I have a Fission Wave. Again, it's just an understable 11-speed. Really nothing much I can say more about it. Don't really throw this too often if it's windy, but if there's a tailwind or it's very calm, I can throw this on some hyzer, get some nice turn out of it. Probably a max distance disc for me, honestly. Also a disc I can trust still in the woods, even though it's a faster disc, to throw some hyzer flips on, you know, get a little bit of turn out of it, depending on how much hyzer I put it on. If I throw it flat, it can kind of just burn over to the right, especially if it's windy. But in the right conditions or in the right situations, really find this to be a nice, controllable, understable, you know, distance driver, or lower speed distance driver, whatever you want to call it, that I can sometimes even get max distance out of. Really enjoy this quite a lot. And then for something a little bit more overstable, kind of in that control driver slot, I have this Moonshine Boatman. This is kind of similar to me to like a Wraith or like an Orbit Grace, or just kind of name your stable to slightly overstable 11-speed or 10-speed disc. This is kind of what this does. This has a pretty straight flight, but definitely has some finish to the end of it. For me, this is kind of just like a further flying Halo Dynasty as far as like other disc in my bag. I can also throw this on some nice straight forehands that are more controllable than a distance driver forehand would be, but can definitely get more distance than me throwing like one of my Felons on a forehand. All right, and now it's time for distance drivers, and essentially I throw a bunch of swords. You probably already know that. I have 6 swords in the bag. Granted, a couple of them are just kind of backups. They're not really ones I go to quite a lot. I just kind of have them in case I'm practicing and I want to be able to throw multiple shots. I have them in the bag. I could probably narrow this down to like 3 or 4 and that would be totally fine. These 2 are practically the same. These are my most understable swords. So this is like an old beat up VIP sword. This is the oldest disc in my bag. I've had it for probably 2.5 to almost 3 years at this point. Super understable, most unstable distance driver. Definitely really only throw it in very calm conditions or like in a tailwind, or if I need just a huge turnover. Can even throw backhand rollers with it if need be, although it hurts my soul to throw a roller with a disc with an airbender stamp on it. It's meant to fly, so I don't really do it too much, but definitely a disc I enjoy quite a lot. Also kind of max distance. If I throw it on a good bit of hyzer in calm conditions, I can get it to, you know, flip up to flat, ride to the right, kind of pan out and get some big distance with it. And then this dyed up orbit sword, basically kind of the same thing. This is probably my furthest flying disc next to the wave and the sword I just showed you. Good bit of understability. If I throw it flat, it's going to turn right for a good amount of time and then kind of pan out. Throw on a touch of hyzer, it'll flip up the flat, get a little bit of turn, and then eventually kind of pan out, maybe get a touch of finish, but not really too much. But I can kind of push these like for the furthest, you know, somewhere between like 325 and 360 feet. That's kind of where my max distance is right now, and this is kind of the disc that gets it done for me. So those are kind of the 2 most understable swords in my bag. For a little bit of a bump up, I have this tournament sword, which has also been in my bag for a really long time, and then I have another orbit sword right here. These essentially are just a bump up in stability from the other 2 swords. They're still pretty understable, all things considered, but they have a little bit more integrity. I can trust them a little bit more. Not into a headwind, but in neutral conditions, I can actually get a little bit of left finish out of these if I throw them on the right angle. Basically just dead straight neutral flyers for me with a touch of turn, and so that's what really these are for. And then for some swords that are like a little bit more overstable, I had this new run of VIP Moonshine. This definitely doesn't have nearly as much turn as the other swords in my bag. It mostly just flies dead straight and actually does have some left finish. And so if I need something that I need to make sure I don't really get too much turn out of, that'll fly mostly straight and give me a little bit of left finish, that's when I kind of step up to this Moonshine Sword. And then finally, I have like this, I don't even know how to describe it. This is like a mutant sword. It is the domiest sword ever. Super pop top, you can hear it. It's like this special running sword that Trilogy Talk came out with, and for whatever reason, this run just came out like incredibly domey. It's a normal tournament sword, but it basically has almost the same stability as like a Tournament X or VIP X sword. I mean, this thing, it's pretty beefy and it's domey, so it has a ton of glide. I use this for like pushing hyzers. Like this thing wants to definitely get some fade to it, much more fade than probably any other sword I've ever thrown. This is definitely like my kind of like main overstable distance driver if it's neutral or calm conditions. Definitely still don't really trust it in a headwind. It's going to turn in those situations, but in neutral conditions, this thing is going to get some left finish on a backhand. Really kind of like a go-to, again, overstable backhand distance driver in neutral conditions where I can still push forward quite a lot, but still get that left finish that I want. This sword, just like I said, it's kind of like a mutant, just the way it came out so domey and the fact that it came out more stable than probably any other sword that I've thrown besides maybe like one of the VIP X swords that came out. Now, if I do need a bump up in stability, we get to basically our final disc here, and that is going to be the Czars. So basically the Czars are kind of like race. I mean, there's really no other way to put it. They kind of fit in that same slot. I have a normal star or S-line version, then I have the Halo version, which has a little bit more overstability. These are basically kind of like that last sword I showed you, just more overstable than the swords, get some good left finish out of them. This one, the Halo one, actually can fight headwinds for me a pretty good bit, still get some left finish. And so these are kind of my main overstable distance drivers outside of that last sword that I showed you on backhands. Even this, you know, Halo I can throw for like some more controlled forehands in comparison to like maybe a slightly faster disc. I just feel like I have a little more control over this on a forehand. So those are some other good reasons why I'll use the Czars. And then last but not least, for main disc in my bag, I have 2 Emperors in the bag. I have the normal S-Line, and then I have the Halo. These are mostly for forehands. That's pretty much the only time you see me throw these are on forehands. This is much straighter. Forehand disc has some turn to it. My max distance forehand, I can push this sometimes up to 350 feet, but definitely pretty much always can push it over 300 feet if I throw it correctly. Then I have the Halo Emperor, just a touch more stability. Not going to have as much turn as this one has. Is going to get a little bit more finish as well. And so, you know, these are kind of my 2 main forehand distance drivers for maximum distance. And also, if I need to fight a headwind on a backhand and I'm not trusting the Czar for some reason, then maybe I can go to like the Halo Emperor for that. And this S-Line Emperor is beaten enough to where I can actually get some good forward distance on a backhand as well. But usually I would just throw that overstable sword or one of my Czars instead, just because the rim's a little bit wider on these Emperors, so they don't feel as comfortable in my hand. That's really the main thing. On a forehand, they feel great. That's really about it for the disc in my bag. The only other disc I can tell you about is that I do have a glitch in the bag, which is mostly for playing catch and warming up, but I can also use it for like little touchy shots or something like that if I want to. And then finally, I have this Ethos Mantra. This is just ridiculously understable. I use this for rollers. This is my main roller disc. I'm not really good at rollers. I'm just starting to learn how to throw them, but this disc definitely has the understability to be a pretty good roller for me. That's really the main reason why I have it in the bag, is for that purpose. And that pretty much does it. The only other stuff I really carry in my bag is I do have a disc retriever. I do usually have some type of dry set to keep my hands dry from sweat or wet conditions. And then I have a rangefinder. I got like the original Bushnell Sport 850 before they came out with the Edge one for disc golf. And then I usually carry some gum, you know, permanent markers, pencils, you know, things of that nature. And I pull my bag on a cart, you know, to save my back, you know. So that pretty much wraps it up. Hope you folks enjoyed this content. If you did, please follow and subscribe. We're pushing towards 1,000 subs at this point. When I put this out, we've already passed the 950 threshold here very recently. Definitely got some help from the Foundation Disc Golf crew. They kind of helped bump me up a little bit when they kind of let me do a little bit of a shout out on the talk show I did over there. So that's been super cool. And so yeah, just make sure you follow, like, comment, show me what you're throwing. Tell me if you like some of the stuff that I showed you. And yeah, catch you next time.